A very good evening to our viewers on Globespan 24/7 as we bring your Monday night program from New York, Guyana, the Caribbean, of course, around the world. Tonight we want to again pay our tribute to the late Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth II, who we have all known something about. I'm sure most of us would have watched the ceremony early this morning as they laid her to rest in the United Kingdom. So again, on behalf of Globespan 24/7 and all of us, we want to extend to the family of United Kingdom, the Commonwealth, and of course around the world, our deepest sympathy on the passing of a wonderful woman. Today we are very privileged and honored to have two outstanding citizens of our country. And to say they have toiled the gutters would have been an understatement, because they have stayed with the PPP from the time they joined it. Never believing at one time, never losing hope that Guyana will one day be restored to a democratic country. And that happened in 1992. But before that, our two guests tonight were all part of the PPP in opposition. And it's our pleasure tonight to invite to our program Mrs. Indranie Chandarpal. We all know her maiden name was Dhanraj. When she got married to that lovely Navin, she became Chandarpal. So, Ms. Chandarpal, welcome to the program tonight.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure indeed.
Right. And of course, no stranger again, in retired or resigned or whatever it was in 1915, when he was at that time the permanent secretary in the office of the president, which was renamed Ministry of the Presidency, Mr. Hydar Ali. Mr. Ali, welcome to the program tonight.
Thank you very much, Sugrim, and I wish I can make a contribution to your program tonight.
Yeah, and we look forward to seeing you live, because we're having some technical issues with Mr. Hydar Ali, internet connection with his camera. So as soon as we get us sorted out, Mr. Ali will be live. But in the meantime, we have that handsome picture of him on our screen. Of course, with me is my co-host, Dr. Rose. Dr. Rose, welcome.
Thank you, Charles, and welcome, Mrs. Indranie Chandarpal and Mr. Hydar Ali. Great to have you in our program tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, before we start tonight, Ms. Chandarpal, I know many Guyanese know both you and Mr. Ali, you being a former minister in the first PEP government after free and fair election, and then you took on different roles after that. But can you quickly tell our audience, and of course your husband, Navin Chandarpal, also was an advisor to the president for many, many, many years. Can you, I know, as I said, you were Dhanraj before you got married, and you're also from East Coast. So tell us something about yourself, some more.
Okay, I'm the daughter of sugar workers. I'm very proud of that. And the estate to which my parents belong was Enmore Estate. I joined politics in 1968 as a young girl. That was the Progressive Youth Organization, very young. It was a time when I was the only woman then, and you had about 140 something guys. And I'll tell you what was a great experience, because I was like their sister. And then in 1970, I joined the PPP and I joined the WPO. And I have never left the PPP for half an hour. Similarly, I've never left the WPO for the same time. I've always been involved. And what is amazing about all of this, the decision that I have taken so long ago is a decision that I'm very proud of, and I have never regretted, not a moment. Because, you know, when you grow up in a sugar estate, when people didn't have a lot, you had to fight for everything. And when eventually you get something in your community, you feel so great about it. So for me, when the PPP came to power in 1957 and up to 61, I will always remember those days. people bringing provision and selling it to your door, the milkman coming to your door, and 3 yards cloth were selling for $1. Us children had our biscuits and milk and cod liver oil tablets, and the dentist, they used to come to our school. What a wonderful time it was. Even though we used to walk on a mud dam because we were under British, they were not concerned about whether we walked on a mud dam or whatever it was. All they were interested in that our parents should go in the fields and do their work. That's their primary concern. So I've watched NMO grow, and I've watched the whole political situation, having lived under the British, then under the PNC, then on the PPP, then on the APNU, and now back under the PPP. So I have a very great understanding of the issues that have unfolded in our country for a very long time. And I'll tell you this, Charles and Dr. Rose, if I have to live my life again, I will do the same thing. I have absolutely no regrets whatsoever. And the other thing I want to say is that perhaps I am one of the very few women of Indo-Guyanese origin that has been involved in politics at such an early age and have been in the leadership of the party as well at that age. So I feel very honored to have been a part of the process to help in the development of our country. And I do hope that one day we will have all the things that we desire as a nation. Hence, the vision of the president for the One Guyana is something I really appreciate, because I believe as Guyanese, it is the way to go. We have to work together as a people to develop our countries. And I want to say further, we all used to say that Guyana is a sleeping giant. We always say that, you will recall, right? The land that has so much natural resources. And today that we have an opportunity to tap some of the resources for the development of our people, it is something that we have to do for the Guyanese people. There was a time we were known for rigged elections, for Jim Jones, and what else were we known for? As being the most underdeveloped country at one time, except Haiti was doing better than us. They were number one, and we were probably the next. But you know what? Today we are known as a country because suddenly we have become relevant. And it is amazing to see every day when you walk in the city how our people are changing. The diversity in the city and every part of the country is amazing. I was in Essequibo over this weekend, and I felt so good to see the people are developing, everybody's taking pride in their community. It gives you a sense of hope. So for me, as a person who has lived here all my life, I am very hopeful about the future for Guyana. Of course, there are problems like every country. There are challenges, but I believe we can overcome them. And I hope with the initiative of the president with the One Guyana, yes, we can move forward as a nation. I think that's a mouthful, Charles and Dr. Rose.
Thank you, Ms. Chandarpal.
Yeah.
I know you talk about your children and so on, but we will you can talk about it afterwards.
Okay.
And of course, your late husband, of course, Navin himself.
He was a great man. One of the few great men in Guyana.
Yeah. Okay. There was some feedback on your when you speak, Ms. Chandarpal. There was some feedback on your side. If there is something you can do to correct that, or when you're not speaking, maybe put it on mute. That would be great.
I will do that, certainly.
And then, of course, Mr. Hydar Ali. Mr. Ali, you came through the ranks to the PP as well. I don't know when you joined, but I know Ms. Chandarpal joined in her teen years. I'm not sure at what time you joined the PPP, but you want to tell us a little about yourself?
Yes, thanks. I would like to consider myself a country boy. I grew up in a small village in the Upper Quarantine. And if I tell you the village, I'm sure you wouldn't know what village, and more so where the village is located.
No, Dr. Rose would know.
I would be surprised if he would know. I come from a village called Namanat village on the quarantine. And number Nat is not next to number one, as a lot of people may want to think. Number Nat is between number 54 and number 55 village on the quarantine. I will not go into the history of how it come to be called number Nat and how and under what circumstances located between villages, 54 and 55. But that's the official name of the village. I'm certain if you post a letter to me, Hydar Ali Namanat village, I'll get it. It wouldn't go into outer space. Yeah, so I come from a farming background, basically, very poor, humble background. My parents were farmers, planting a bit of rice, catching some fish, and a country living on the whole. And I was part of the politics too from a very early age. I think at age 16 or 17, I became a member of the People's Progressive Party. And a year or two later, I also became a member of the People's Progressive Party. So I have been involved from a very early age. And I recall the several moments. It was difficult. It was a very, very difficult period. I have to say, and I'm sure you would also know and can relate to that period. It was a period when life was extremely hard and people were being harassed. I remember I was at one time imprisoned in the lockup for doing nothing, except that somebody made a false claim against me that I threatened, as it were, to burn down some PNC lady house. And nothing could be further from the truth. I'm just saying that to create that background into our entry into politics. It was a very, very, but we lived during our early formative years under what I would consider to be a highly repressive and undemocratic period of rule. And life was very, very difficult for so many people. And when democracy was finally restored to Guyana October 5th, 1992, I think that must have been one of the most exciting period in my life. Because growing up in a dictatorship, being deprived of so many things, being harassed as being member of the PVP and PYO, and then to experience the joy of you, it was very, very overwhelming, very, very rewarding. So I just mentioned that I went to school at number 56 primary school, and then I went on to the Central Quarantine High School. And after that, I got a scholarship from the PPP. I went to study in Germany, in the German Democratic Republic. Then I came back and I went to the college here and to the University of Guyana, and so I become a little more involved in the party politics at Freedom House and at the higher level. So I think that may be enough for now, and I'm sure if there are any other follow-up questions, I would be willing to answer.
And thank you, Mr. Ali. You didn't talk of your two children too. I know you have two children, like Ms. Chandarpal, but and of course, your wife has also passed away some time ago. But what Globespan a couple of weeks ago, we had some Guyanese out here in New York on our Wednesday night program, and they spoke of the diaspora in the restoration of democracy. And I'm so glad that Dr. Rose got you, Ms. Chandarpal, and Mr. Ali, but both of you have been in the PP for a long time. So maybe you can tell us, and I'll invite Dr. Rose now, if you can tell us what did the PPP actually did within Guyana during those years to fight for free and fair election. But before we go into that, Dr. Rose, over to you.
Okay. Ms. Chandarpal, I want to ask you this question. You said you joined the PP in 1967.
I joined the PYO.
Okay.
That's the youth section in 1968.
Okay.
I joined the PPP in 1970.
Okay. So you've been there during Chedi Jagan's time.
A long
You've
time.
been there during Janet Jagan's time, during Farah Jagdir's time, during President Ramatar's time, and now President Ali. which one of those times you will consider to be the most progressive?
Well, I think all are progressive, but I would say each leader has their own style. So you really can't compare because they all bring a different thing, a different kind of perspective and a different type of leadership. But for me, when Dr. Jagan came into power in 1992, you can imagine it was a turning point in our country's history. Having been in opposition for 28 years, for me, it was the most historic period. But one has to recall that when we got into power, it was a very challenging period because the economy was not doing so great. Remember, we came out of the IMF and those challenges with CIMAP, the Social Amelioration Program. We had a situation where you had more public servants than what was required. And there were lots of challenging in the ministry, old typewriters. We didn't have the technology, people sitting in chairs that were not good for them. And we had to start from the scratch to do a lot of the things. Now you got to understand that every party has a manifesto. And once they get into government, that is what guides them. It's their manifesto. They don't pull out something under the cap and start doing like that. They're guided by the manifesto. And in that manifesto, all the groups and party bodies, as well as civil society, there's a lot of consultation as to what are some of the things this or that organization or this or that group would like to see the party do. So it's like a process of consultation. By the time you arrive at I would say, the final edition of the manifesto, it would have benefited from all types of discussions and discourses. Now, a question was put as to what did the PPP do in the period of, I would say, when we've been under 28 years of authoritarian rule. It was both internal and external, in the sense that you do what you had to do in-house to fight, whether it's in the parliament, in the streets, demonstrations, picket lines, petitions, and we also had to work internationally via the embassies, work with the groups, whether they were in England, were in Canada, in the USA, whether they were in different parts of the Caribbean. You had to work with them for them to lobby their government to keep and to know what is happening in Guyana, because rigged election has been the hallmark of the PNC rule, and therefore we had to expose what was happening. Another interesting period was when Dr. Rodney came back to Guyana. I remember I was working at Freedom House, and he walked up the stairs and he had such a warm smile, and he was there to meet Dr. Jagan, and he used to come several times to Freedom House, and they've had lots of discussions. Of course, I wouldn't know what they were talking about, but I saw him at Freedom House. When Dr. Rodney came to Guyana, he also was, how I would say, inspired people as well, because here was not only the PPP fighting for democracy, but you had people other than the PPP, civil society coming out. One would remember the role of Father Dark, who was murdered. So lots of things were happening. It's very hard to chronicle what took place in 28 years in, let us say, in a 5 minutes or a 3 minutes presentation. There are enough history and many things that have been written that one can, read and find out those information. But I would say this, that we won democracy with the help of both our local and international partners, the diaspora, the embassies, the different people. It was not only us in Guyana doing what we had to do. Of course, you couldn't sit on your hands here. There were lots to do. A lot of people were locked up and all kinds of things, and harassed and persecuted and thrown in prison and all of that. So I recall 1973 elections where myself and 3 sisters, the smallest being 12 years of age, locked up in prison for a whole week. And what was it? Because we dared to go and participate in a picketing exercise to tell the PNC ministers we don't want them in our community. So you didn't have the freedom to speak out. You were always afraid that there was somebody behind you. And please don't ever forget the hardships the Guyanese people faced from 1980 on to up to when Mr. Hoyt was elected as president, then when he reintroduced some of the things that were banned by his predecessor. So let me stop here and I will continue.
Mr. Ali, you were aware that during Barnum's reign of 28 years, or 21 years, I should say, there were talks of being an inclusive government or shared governance between the two leaders. It did not happen. Why? You think it did not happen? We're having some problems hearing you.
Of governance. And I remember during the difficult, turbulent period of the 1960s, Dr. Jagan had actually offered the PNC to share the government. Half of the government, half of the cabinet positions were offered to the PNC. But the PNC was never interested in this sharing government because they had a bigger game plan, which was to take power by whatever means possible, rather than sharing. And you would know this, the context of the Cold War and the what transpired at the international level, the intrigues of the British and the Americans during that period to prevent PPP government for ideological and political reasons, geostrategic reasons, and all of that. So I would say that the PNC was never interested in sharing government with the PPP. And the PPP, if you check the records, you would find that the PPP was the very first to advance this process of a national government, a government of national unity. And even though the PNC rigged the elections all the way from 1968 right down to 1985, the PPP had always come up with proposals for a government of national unity, a national front government, as you will recall. So I would say that the PNC, especially under Bonham, was never really interested. You would recall that when Bonham was in government, he labeled the PPP as the Mensheviks. And those of us who know our political terminology, the Mensheviks were what he considered to be the minority. And the Bolsheviks, which is the majority party, and he said the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks cannot discuss any power sharing on equal terms. So what Bonham and the PNC was doing all the time was to use this big state bullyism measure to have a semblance of talks, a facade, as it were, of talks on on shared governance, when in fact they were never interested. And so that is how I want to put it.
Okay. Mistress Chandarpal, after Dr. Jagan died in 1997, Mistress Janet Jagan became the president. But there was some scuffling as to say that she's a foreigner, she should not be president. So she relinquished that and handed it over to Sam Hines for 6 months. During that time, it was rumored that there was a power struggle going on for the leadership. Can you explain what happened there?
I am not aware that there was a power struggle going on. There was an arrangement, I know, because we know, actually, Mrs. Jagan didn't want any position. It is we who were in the leadership urge her to accept the responsibility as a presidential candidate. I don't think there was a struggle at all because almost everybody who was there, they had supported her. So I
No,
don't
I'm
know
talking
where that.
during the time after she handed over power to Sam Hines temporarily for 6 months to find a new leader. That's the time I'm talking about.
Oh, well, I am not, you know, there will always be discussions in a party about the merits of each person. There is that dialogue which would have taken place, but I wouldn't call it a struggle. I would call it is a natural, a natural issue that will arise where people will have the opportunity to say what their thoughts are or who they feel should be the best person. So that happened, but I wouldn't say it was a power struggle, so to speak, because the way our party operates, all these things are discussed in the open, and then a decision is made where the majority will decide. So I wouldn't call it a power struggle. It was a natural process, a democratic process where we all had an opportunity to speak. And since I know myself in the party leadership, that is the way we make decisions. At our central committee, we discuss issues and we arrive at consensus. If it is something that you can find consensus, you have to vote for it. But that's a norm in a democracy. I don't see anything challenging about that.
This question is for both of you, but I'll let you go first, Mrs. Chandarpal. Uh, do you think the PPC of today has maintained the principles and beliefs of Dr. Jagan?
Well, let's put it this way. What is it the PPP of today and the PPP of yesterday? It's always we have the interests of the people at heart. We have the country's development at heart. We want the best for Guyana and Guyanese. It is like, a journey that different people undertake. The destination will remain the same, but the way in which you arrive at the destination will vary. And I always believe that every leader has a different style. But if at the end of the day, the leader achieves what he or she has set out to do, well, they would have achieved what it is they would have accomplished what they are setting out to do. So, of course, everybody have their styles and what perhaps was relevant or what the environment in the period from 92 to 97 was different as compared to now. So every new situation will have to have a new response to it. So it can be because, like when we talk about the environment or when we talk about standing forests, those are things that Dr. Jagan had always been propagating. And the PPP of today has also been propagating those things. And whether we talk about the standard of living for the masses, Dr. Jagan spoke about it when we were in government, when we were in opposition, we still talk about that. Now, today, we have a little more money in the country, we can provide the goods and services for people. But I see all of this development as an ongoing process of change, and it must evolve and things will change and people's style will vary. And that is natural. We're talking about humans here who make mistakes. And there is a tendency that people would like to criticize everything, but if were you to put them in the same situation, it's a different ballgame altogether. So I want to see the positive and not focus too much on the negative. We have to learn how to work with the negative and encourage people. You don't have to destroy or tear somebody down in order to get how to change them. Powers of persuasion, to my mind, are very important to help people to achieve certain goals.
Mr. Ali, same question to you, quickly before my colleague.
Well, the, the environment change ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the early 1990s, and that has created a new global dispensation. And therefore, we have to see the evolving politics along the lines of the big global changes that have taken place since then. Now, the PPP has always embraced a policy, a philosophy, if you like, of governing in the interests of the masses, and in particular, the working class. And as far as I can see, the PPP has never departed from that philosophy of governance that puts people at the center of all the developmental programs and activities that are going on. And I don't have to tell you, you can just look at the way the budget is being allocated and see that most of the money that is being allocated spent on social programs, education, health, housing, water, you name it. And so I would say that philosophically, the PPP has never departed, as it were, from that philosophy of governing in the interests of the people, and especially when it comes to the working people. So I would say, yes, there is a pro-people orientation of the PPP that started way back from the early days of the PPP in I wouldn't consider 53 as very significant because the party only governed for 6 months, and we all know the history behind that. But from 1957 right down to 1964, if you examine the PPP policies and programs, it has always been one that is pro-people, pro-working class, while at the same time trying to create the environment for the private sector to also flourish. That's the reason why in 1964, the PPP established the industrial site and gave a lot of incentive to the private sector also to grow, because the PPP understands clearly that you have to create wealth. Wealth creation is very important if any society is to advance. So, and that philosophy or that governance philosophy or model has not really changed. It's still continuing.
Okay, Charles, over to you.
Chandarpal, when you were chairperson of the Women and Gender Equality Commission, are you still a chairperson or?
Actually, I am. And
okay.
We're in the process of renewal right now.
Okay. You had stated, and I quote, the jury system is failing. The quality of jurors leave much to be desired, and we must do away with the jury system. Do you still stand by that statement?
Well, the present jury system, of course, because the pool that they're pulling from is not the best, because people in this country don't really want to get involved in the jury system, and they're scraping at the barrel to get people. And I think it is necessary to overhaul the jury system so that you can have people that are much more qualified and are able to understand the issues even better. And in that way, I think they can make different decisions.
So what would you recommend? I mean, what are some of the things that should be done?
Well, we have recommended to the Attorney General for him. We can't tell him what they need to do. We say to him that this is something that needs to be done. And it is for you, the people who are in the Attorney General chambers and the people who are involved in law, to be able to decide what is the methodology you will use in order to arrive at something that people are comfortable with. Our job is to make recommendation, and we interact with stakeholders right across the country, and we listen to them, and then we will recommend to Parliament. We will meet ministers, we will meet the Commissioner of Police, and we will make recommendations wherever. For example, the noise nuisance is something that we're all bothered about. We met the Commissioner of Police about a month ago. We explained to him our concerns. He's aware of it, and they are trying to do their very best, but at the end of the day, citizens have to go in and make the complaints, and then the police will take it up. You know how it is. And sometimes the citizens talk about it, but then they don't want to go and make a report. So we have to look at how to resolve these problems in a different way, because you will understand that people sometimes are hesitant in going to police stations to talk about things. There is that always, they feel that they will not be listened to, or they will be penalized. There is that feeling, and one has to find a different way to deal with the situation of noise nuisance and the jury pool and all of that.
Right. We know the noise nuisance is a problem, but like even here in North America, some young guys would turn the music right up, put the windows down, and they think that their music is so beautiful, everyone must hear it. And I guess that the same concept is a cultural thing in Guyana, that people want to play their music so loud because they think it's so beautiful without knowing that it's affecting others who might not. But that's the noise and the music problem. But in terms of the jury, you would call to abolish the jury system. Are you calling for abolition of the system or to reform it?
We want it to be reformed.
Okay.
We want it to be reformed. And if it cannot be reformed, then you might as well do away with it. But we were advised that you can't do away with it. You may have to look at reforming it. So that is in the, I would assume it's being looked at. I don't know when this process will begin or what will happen, but our job is to make recommendations.
Okay, and I think that's a good thing, because everything sometimes needs to be reformed. And maybe, as you rightly said, they're pulling from a pool that might not be qualified. So maybe a minimum qualification from the jurors might be necessary, whatever that format takes.
Right.
I think that's a good recommendation. Mr. Ali, you know that the PPP was kept out of power in 1964. And if you go back to the history of what happened in England, when Dr. Jagan signed to change our electoral system from constituent to PR system, and that was done with the American backing, of course, because they think his philosophy of Marxist-Leninism was wrong, his ideology. Do you think that PPP is to be blamed for being out of power for 28 years because of the ideology?
Can you hear me? Because
yes, I'm hearing you.
You're hearing me? Okay. Well, again, that's a very interesting question you posed to me there. And it's one that a lot of people ask from time to time, whether the PPP would have been out of power because of the ideology, the philosophy at the time that the party embraced. But I have always held the view that the PPP, whatever people may want to say about the party, it has always been democratic. And the PPP has never at any stage in its political history departed from the question of democracy.
No, Ms. Ali, I'm not disputing you that. Sorry, I'm cutting you. I'm not disputing that. What I'm saying is that the Americans in those days, in the 60s, they decided that this philosophy of the Marxist-Leninist philosophy of the PPP should not lead Guyana to independence. And that gave Burnham the opportunity to rig all the election because he had a free hand. So my question to you, do you think that the PPP and Dr. Jagan and Mrs. Jagan were kind of really responsible to be in the doldrum for 28 years?
I don't think so. I don't think so at all, because I am not trying to downplay the geopolitical situation that obtained at the time, and that the Western countries did not find Dr. Jagan that much in their favor, let me put it like that, because of the ideology embraced. But the thing about it is that Dr. Jagan had given all the assurances that as far as his policies and programs are concerned, he was not going to establish any one-party dictatorship or any situation where the market would have been affected, the free market. Of course, he spoke about the nationalization of the commanding heights of the economy and all of that. But essentially, I would say that the PPP had always embraced a democratic framework of rule. And let's take the 1957 period. not the 57, just the 53 period. The PPP won that election with by winning 18 out of 24 seats. That was one of the most massive victory in the history of Guyana. And yet for all, in 6 months, the British suspended the constitution and the PPP was removed from office. It was not until 57 that the elections were held again, and PPP won that election, again with a massive victory, 9 out of the 14 seats. And it was only in the 1964 period that the constitution was changed, to change from the constituency system to the PR system, and that although the PPP won that election by winning most of the votes, the PNC and the United Force form a coalition government. They probably got about 52% of the vote, and they were able to form the government. The rest is history. So I would say that the PPP cannot be accused of not being democratic or wanting in any way to go against the free market system that was that was in being all the time. And as I said earlier, it was the PPP that established the industrial site and gave a lot of incentives in the 64 period to private enterprises to prosper and flourish. So I would not subscribe to that view, respectfully, that the PPP has been responsible for its own demise and that Dr. Jagan did not adequately take into account the geopolitical situation that obtained at that period.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a short commercial break now. And when we come back, we will continue this important conversation. So don't go anywhere, audience, we'll be right back.
Is when this wedding got done? Right now my belly burning for the 7 curry. But them fancy people just call it vegetarian food. I just call it 7 curry.
Order your 7 curry or vegetarian box today from allfromonesupplier.com and get free shipping throughout the US.
Take a trip this year to tour the beautiful Dubai and Abu Dhabi with Globespan. This package includes a round trip with sights that are a beauty to behold. Visit the Dubai Golden City from views at the top of the Burj Khalifa, or tour Abu Dhabi and visit the Ferrari World theme park. Experience the desert safari with a barbecue dinner and belly dancing. And also have a Dow cruise dinner. Call in Guyana 227-1701, that's 227-1701, or in the United States 212-243-0865, that's 212-243-0865. And in Trinidad, call 645-1604.
Looking for a reliable contractor? Look no further. Call Sings Construction today. At Sings Construction, they can cover all your jobs, interior and exterior. We cover painting, bathrooms, kitchen, doors, windows, tiles, brick, decks, flooring, and concrete. Call Naresh Singh today for your free quote at 91723848180. That's 91723848180.
Okay, welcome back to our audience. We want to thank you for staying with us as we have the former minister in the PP administration, Ms. Chandarpal, and the former PS in the office of the president, Mr. Hydar Ali. Ladies and gentlemen, before we went to break, we spoke of the ideology, and Ms. Ali, I totally agree with you that in the eyes of Guyanese, Dr. Jagan was not this Marxist-Leninist as the West brand him to be, because as you rightly said, he opened the MMA, not the MMA,
the industrial site,
the Black Bush project.
Yes.
He also had these development areas. So he was actually pushing the Guyanese to elevate themselves, but the West somehow, the Americans in particular, didn't see it that way. And my question to you, Mr. Ali and Ms. Chandarpal, is who else except Cuba in the Caribbean had an ideology like Dr. Jagan that the Americans tried to put down? Is there anyone else?
Maurice Bishop, when he started out, the Maurice Bishop government was pro-democratic rule and was for socialist principles. I don't think they were necessarily communist countries. They were socialist principles. And this is precisely what we had here. There were certain principles of socialism that we adhere to, because we did not believe in one-party rule. We believe in the trisectoral economy. We believe that you need to have development with a human face, those kinds of things. And that is what we set out to do. But I want to go back to something you had said during the break. When we talk about the different forces at work, those of us who lived through the 60s will recall the role of the trade union movement and the Catholic Church. I'm going to point the two organizations out. They were literally going to people home and telling them that how Jagan is a communist and he's going to separate people's children, send the children away from them. All kind of false things the church and the trade unions were doing. We know of their role. And when those papers were eventually declassified, the situation that had occurred in the 60s, those names were called, because I think it was Philip Adji who wrote the book about all the things that had happened in Guyana. And when the information was made public, to see the role that was played by outside forces to destabilize the country, you have to remember the role of the colonial power, or the colonialism as a system. They did not want independent or small countries such as ours to go the path of development, because had Guyana been allowed to develop in the 50s, because when you look at the manifesto of 1953, the manifesto was all about developing our country. And I would love if you can have that manifesto sometime or the other, to look at what was said, nothing about socialism or communism. It was all about what you can do for the development of the people so the Guyanese people can have a better life. But of course, our colonial masters didn't want that, because you're going to be setting the wrong precedent for others to follow. So they had to nip it in the bud, and that's what they did, so that every other country will always remember what happened to Guyana, and they will not go down that road.
Mr. Chandarpal, you're absolutely correct. I fully support what you said there, except you see what happened to Maurice Bishop, what the Americans did. They got rid of him. And that's what I live in America, but the American history has been very, very bad in the third world, especially the non-white countries. They've really plundered those countries, and they do whatever they want. And there was a nice YouTube video of what the Americans did to different parts of the world for leaders. Guyana was included in that. And as you rightly said, the PP manifesto was all about development, right. But in the eyes of the American leadership, they see him as this Marxist-Leninist, which will align with Cuba. And again, let's look at the American side. Cuba just was, almost we had a nuclear war with Cuba, with the Soviet Union going. So I guess in the American side, look at their side, they didn't want to have that again, another Cuba right in the Americas. So even Dr. Jagan was not this kind of person the West proclaimed to be, and his development was more of getting a holistic development of Guyana, the rest is history. We know the Americans kept him out of power for 28 years because of that ideology.
Well, they use ideology as a pretext. You know that. It's all about the pretext to keep him out of power because he was setting a bad example for the other small third world countries. That if Guyana can take charge of their destiny and improve themselves, then that is not good for the other countries. Like, you know, in the late 40s, when all the countries were fighting to throwing off the yoke of colonialism, they wanted their independence. That was a movement that was there where countries felt that they should be independent or should be a republic. And this is the debate that will also, perhaps that debate will be reopened again. Should we be part of the Commonwealth? Should we be part of you remember the non-aligned movement and all of that? And also you remember Dr. Jagan called for a new global human order because of what was taking place. You had two order, and out of the Cold War, there seems to be a domination for a period of one order. And now efforts are being made by groups of people to put a check or checkmate the world order so that you can have a balance in the world. So all these things are happening and we have to understand what's playing out. And you know, your countries can get caught up in that if you want to, how you say, behave differently. So I guess for us, that was a lesson for our people to understand that it is not about isms, it's about development, it's about the will to make your decision, it's about the freedom to choose the path of development that you want. And so they use isms to prevent you from going to the or making that developmental decision. And so one has to understand that as well.
Dr. Rose?
Yes, I want to get back to the same topic there. We know Dr. Jagan's principles of governance has been aligned to the Soviet Union principles of governance, or the Marxist-Leninist trait of governance. I want to ask you, Mr. Ali, do you think that Dr. Jagan was a communist?
Well, I think he had Marxist, Leninist, and communist sympathies. There's no question about that. As to whether he was can be labeled a communist in the sense that we know it today, I don't think that will accurately fit that characterization. I think that Dr. Jagan meant well for the Guyanese people, especially for the working class. And the Americans subsequently acknowledged this fact, that they made a mistake about Dr. Jagan and his intentions. If you could recall in his book, 100 Days in the White House, Arthur Schlesinger, who was advisor to President Kennedy at the time, openly said that the United States made a mistake about Dr. Jagan. And later on, Schlesinger, when Dr. Jagan became president in the 1990s, openly apologized to Dr. Jagan for having done a great disservice to him and to the PPP and to the people of Guyana. Because what resulted from their actions in the 60s was to set in motion a process of dictatorial rule, incompetence in government that resulted in Guyana being, by the end of the 1980s, one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere. And that was bad, not only for the Guyanese people, but for the United States as well, because they could not have done any serious business of a commercial or any other political nature with Guyana. And you would recall that at one time under Forbes Bonham, there was a rupture in diplomatic relations, and the U.S. break diplomatic relations with the Bonham administration after it went the way it went by completely rupturing the whole democratic process in the country and leading to a process of underdevelopment and pauperization of the Guyanese people. So yes, I would say that the United States made a mistake in their intentions about Dr. Jagan and the PPP, and also they recognize that this mistake turned out to be very costly in terms of the democracy and all that goes with democracy in the country. So I just thought I should mention that.
What would you say, Mr. Chandarpal? Do you think he was a communist?
I share the sentiments expressed by my colleague, because we know that all he was interested is the developing the people of his country. He wanted to ensure that the measures that the government put in place are for the people. He believed in people being at the center of development. And if you want to call it isms, and you want to call it Marxism, or you want to call it any other ism, where you want your people to have a better life, you want to give them the things they deserve, well, so be it. He wanted the best for Guyanese people. And he was prepared to stand up as a person and defend what he believed in.
And if I may just add a little before you go on, if you look at Guyana at the time of the 1960s, under the PPP, that limited period from 57 to 64, Guyana was making tremendous advances economically and in the social sectors in particular, under Dr. Jagan and the PPP. And when the PPP was removed from government, that development trajectory began to take a downward spiral, resulting, as I said, in Guyana being one of the poorest countries in the hemisphere, under the PNC, UF collision, and the PNC subsequently, which the United States, as we know, back. So that we have to see Dr. Jagan's results during the tenure of his rule. But progress, economic, social, and political progress was made in the country under his tenure. And that continued in 1992, October 1992, when democracy was restored. And look how much development has taken place under the PPPC administration. And it's still continuing until now. So I would say that the PPP has transformed this country in positive ways in so many facets of national development. And I would say that we are living right now in exciting times. I don't think in the history of Guyana we are experiencing the levels of development that we are seeing today. I don't want to go into all of that because you know from your own experience the spectacular improvements that are taking place in Guyana right now, thanks to oil and gas, but also the prudent management of the economy under the PPPC administration.
I want to move on to the recent questions now. In today's world, the PPP, some say the PPP has passed the torch from the old guards to the new guards, or to a new set of leaders, which the party hierarchy believe will bring new ideas, fresh ideas, original ideas, and so forth. Mr. Chandarpal, I want to ask you this question. Why do you think you're not given any substantive position in today's government?
Well, you think I should be there forever? I don't believe that. I believe that we must have changes, and you must bring in new people. I don't believe that just because I've been a party stalwart and I've been there for 8 years, I should be kept on forever and ever. I don't believe in that, because at the end of the day, the government of the day must have the right to choose who they feel. And if we're talking about changes, and if, it's funny that you're raising this question, because when you have the old folks, they talk about the old guards, that, oh, don't you have any young, fresh blood? And when you bring the young, fresh blood, they say, where are the old guards? You see, you can never please the people. You need to have a balance. And that is fine. I am not worried about me. I have made my contributions. I feel honored that I was given an opportunity to serve the people of my country under Chetty Jagan, under Sam Hines, under Janet Jagan, and partly under Barajagdev. I don't have a difficulty with none of that. I am doing work that has to be done. And not everything you do must be in the public eye. So I am happy with where I am. And I don't feel in any way that my party should be constrained just because we're from the old school that you must necessarily just keep them there.
Okay.
You must have renewal, you must have growth.
Agreed. Mr. Ali, I will have to ask you this question. You remain the permanent secretary to the office of the president after Apno was elected. For how many years? 2 years?
Well, let me correct you on a few things here. First, I was not a permanent secretary in the office of the president. I served for a little while at the office of the president, but in my capacity as the deputy head of the presidential secretariat.
Okay.
But I was permanent secretary in several ministries, starting out with the Ministry of Education. Then I moved to the Ministry of Health, and then to the PNC, to the Public Service Ministry. After
No,
the change
but
of
my question is, you're the deputy head in the office of the president. How many years after Apno took office?
no, never under Apno. Never under Apno. When I came into government, I was permanent secretary in the Public Service Ministry. And immediately, I resigned. I took my resignation immediately after the government changed. But like everything else, they asked me to stay on for 1 month until the final replacement. So I was there just for 1 month until a replacement was put. So I did not serve. I immediately I tendered my resignation when there was a change of government.
Okay. Now, my question to you, Mr. Ali. The PP now is in government for 2 years. And as you said, money is flowing from the oil and gas and so forth. But do you think that money or those resources are reaching the masses?
Look, we are still in the early stages of the oil injections of revenues. And it is a little too early to expect big transformational changes in the country because it will take time. The inflows are not as big as we potentially would have later down the road. But if you were to ask me, I would say yes. These revenues are beginning already to make a difference in the lives of people, especially ordinary people. There are so many interventions that are made at several levels to bring relief to especially poor people, especially having regard to the COVID-19, and then the war in Ukraine, which has sent up the cost of living somewhat. So the PPP has diverted significant sums of money to cushion the effects of the cost of living caused by these two convergences. So yes, but you have to see it even within a much bigger context, where a lot of infrastructural works are taking place. The road infrastructure, buildings, so many other developments, the gas to shore facility that is expected to come on stream maybe in another 2 years or so, which will drastically reduce the cost of energy in Guyana and make Guyana much more competitive in terms of its overseas market production costs and all of that. So yes, I would say our better days are still to come from the perspective of our oil revenues, but already we are seeing some transformative projects coming on stream, which will be to the benefit of all Guyanese. Much more money is put in the education sector. More money is put into health. Only recently, the government announced 6 new hospitals are going to be built, in addition to a maternal hospital, a specialist maternal and children hospital, right in Ogle here. So what I'm saying is that the oil revenues are already beginning to impact, but the full benefits of the oil revenue will come later down the road.
Okay. Mr. Chandarpal, your colleague, Mr. Ali, said that yes, the revenues begin to impact the people, but yet United Nations report, August report, shows that poverty rate is written where Guyanese not basic entities are not being granted to Guyanese, 39% of them, which is almost over 300,000 people. How would you square that with what your colleague just said?
Well, I'll tell you this. Um, there are sections of our society, or there are sections of our society where, let me put it this way, we hear about people not getting jobs. We hear that they're not getting opportunities, but yet there is a shortage of labor. For example, if you want somebody to, let us say, at a lower level of a domestic or a gardener or somebody to do work at that level, you will find that it is a challenge to get people. You want a babysitter, it's a hard thing to find, those kinds of jobs. And there's so many people out there are saying that I want to work, but they don't want to do these types of work. They want job at a certain level, but they're not qualified to do it. But I want to share this experience with you. I was in Essequibo this weekend, and we know based on the region people, they said 2,000 jobs were created for people who are, are not working or are in need of an income. 2,000 jobs, whereby 1,500 of those were women getting that job, and how their lives have been transformed. You will always find in all society, there are certain elements, there are certain segments of the people, they don't want to move out of their comfort zone, so to speak, and to take up the challenges. Look, through the Ministry of Labor, the Board of Industrial Training, they're offering training right across this country. There is a WIN program. But, some people just don't want to get up and get, simply put. It's easy to, some want just to receive handouts and complain all the time. But there are enough opportunities for people to go out there and find something to do. So I wouldn't say at this point in time that everybody will get the job that they need. This is something, I see this as a process whereby we have to try to look at our education system from one in which we not only look at the CXC, but we also need to look at skill training. That is something we need to do a lot. Provide them with certain skills so they can go out and sell their labor. Right now, if you want a carpenter, you have to make an appointment with a carpenter never heard of in this country before. You got to make an appointment 2-3 months before they can come and do your work, because of the rapid development in housing in different parts of this country. You have to remember a lot of our people have migrated to the small islands to do carpentry work. A lot of them have used their visas. They go to United States, they do the home care, whatever they can do. So we're now faced with the problem of getting laborers here. But you got 44,000 people who are from whether Venezuela, Brazil, or Cuba, wherever. They're here, they're prepared to take any type of jobs. But some of the people we have in our country, they don't want to take any kind of job. They want to go after alcohol, they want to go into drugs, and they're happy with that. And perhaps waiting for you guys over there to send them $100 from time to time, and they're happy with that. They don't want to go out and work. So that's the challenge that you face.
Mrs. Chandarpal.
Yes.
I was in Ghana for a few months. I just came back last week. And the idea that there's a shortage of skilled labor, somehow, I don't think I'm buying it, because I test the market myself. If I call a plumber tomorrow and tell him I'm going to pay you $7 a day to come fix it, he tell me no. Instead of paying $9, 10 will show up. Same thing for carpenters, same thing for masons, everybody. These guys, they realize the cost of living has gone up, so they're making greater demands. But there are laborers there who will work for the money and not take $6,000 or $7,000 a day. You got to pay them 8 and 9 and 10 before the shop. But that's a different topic altogether.
Well, it is different in different places. Where I live on the East Coast, it's a different story. So your experience will be different from my experience. And I can only speak from what I know based on my experience.
Okay. In the PP manifesto in the 2020 election, it stated that they will renegotiate the oil contract. 2 years have passed, not a word on that topic or that issue. Why?
Well, I will point you to a discussion that the Vice President had with Mr. Glenn Lal, in which a lot of those issues were raised. So I will not enter into that area. I suspect that perhaps it would be useful to get the Vice President on this program and let him speak, because he has spoken on this issue already recently. So I will not get into that.
Okay. Mr. Ali, you want to get into that? Mr. Ali?
On the issue of what?
The oil
contract. Manifesto
contract?
during the 2020 election, they said they will renegotiate the oil contract. And I'm just being fair. This is what was said. I'm not being critical of the party or anything of the sort. But 2 years have passed and no word on renegotiating the contract as yet. Why?
Well, I think we have to understand that there's something. I want to use the word very carefully here. Sacrosanct about contracts. Contracts can't be just changed unilaterally, as far as my understanding of contract law goes. Once a contract has been entered into, you probably will have to live with that. But it does not follow from that the contract cannot be revisited and attempts made to have some kind of modification to the contract made maybe in subsequent engagements, not necessarily on the same thing. So this is a sensitive matter. And I can't say that I have all the explanations. But what I can say is that the PPP Civic Administration, the President, the Vice President, has been repeatedly saying that they inherited a bad contract from the APNU AFC. And obviously, this is not something that they can be remedied within any short period of time. So I think that if the PPP were at the time in government, I'm certain that we would have had a much more a fairer, more balanced contract that would have been skewed more in favor of the Guyanese people, and from which we would have.
So you're saying that they should not have put this then in the manifesto?
What, to renegotiate the contract?
Yeah.
Well, I have to. I can't recall exactly what was stated in the manifesto, but what I can say, I don't have the manifesto before me. I can't speak to that right now. But what I can say is that the PPP was not happy with the current contract that was signed between the Granger administration and ExxonMobil at the time.
Okay.
That's what I can say.
Charles?
Okay, Mr. Ali, some time ago you had written that the healthcare system in Guyana, you applauded the system. You still do? And you found fault with the system in the US and Europe.
There is no perfect system in any part of the world. That goes for the political system, it goes for the subsystems, health, housing, education. And you would know too that even in the United States, the waiting period sometimes for getting attention by the doctors can be very long and tortuous. So we have to understand that Guyana is still a developing country. We can match the resources of the developed countries. But what I can say is that since the PPPC came into government, a lot of emphasis was placed on upgrading the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure of the hospitals. New hospitals were built. The Diamond Diagnostic Centers in several parts of the country were built under the PPP administration. They were fitted with initially with Cuban doctors and nurses and technicians. Now the PPP is again starting a process of building new state-of-the-art hospitals in regions almost of the country, including Region 9. So that I mentioned earlier, a new child and maternal hospital is going to be built state-of-the-art. So the PPP has been putting tremendous resources in two of the most important and critical areas of human development, education and health. And it is beginning to impact the system already in terms of the quality of education and health delivery. So
But yet,
yes,
Mr. Ali, but yet we have the highest mortality rate in Guyana for infant mortality compared to the CARICOM. Why is that so?
I cannot. I have no access to the records right now. I can only go with what you are saying. So right now, I can explain what if that is the case. The reason for that, except to say that we are still rebuilding the health infrastructure, the service delivery systems, and it would take some time.
Ms. Chandarpal, I know you deal a lot with women's issue. Why is suicide? Suicide in Guyana is considered, I think, the 5th highest cause of death. Is that still the case, or has changed? And why is suicide so rampant in Guyana?
Suicide is rampant in Guyana. Yes, we're concerned about it. And there are lots of programs that are in place to bring awareness to the issue. But you have to understand the realities in terms of why is it that people take their lives. One has to look at stress, depression, alcoholism, drugs, domestic violence, sexual abuse, all these kinds of things. They are precursor to situations that eventually will allow for somebody to take their lives. Parental pressure, spouses that have been left by themselves can't cope with the stress of losing a partner, children being forced to do well and are unable to deliver, people who are heartbroken, and all kinds of reasons. People who feel frustrated with life, somebody quarreled with you, and at the spur of the moment, you decide you're not gonna, there are all kinds of reasons. And it's not a specific reason why people take their lives. A lot of time it's anger, they're frustrated, all kinds of things. But I think what we are seeking to do at the moment is to create more awareness and provide facilities so people, if they have problems, they can call a hotline, they can get counseling, and they don't have to go the route of taking your life. Talk to somebody, see if they can help you. That is the way. I know the Ministry of Human Services have started out a program. They're talking about the Advocate program, whereby if you have a problem, let's say in your marriage, with your children, whatever the case may be, you can call a hotline, you can get a community advocate to talk to. Those are initiatives that are ongoing right now. And we're hoping that with the involvement of more civil society organizations, the government through the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security, they will able to reduce that. We're not happy as a country that, people say your country has the highest suicide rate in the world. It's not something that you're happy with, but we have to work to reduce it. Look, today it was brought to my attention a situation that is so sad. A father was beaten to death by his son. The son, who is a druggie, beat his father under the influence of drugs, beat him into a pulp and killed him. And drugs is something that we have to deal with. Alcoholism is another thing. These are societal issues that are not, if they're not dealt with, in a prompt way, it can have some consequences for our country. So these are realities that we're trying to deal with, but we need many more people to come on board and to help. So
And
that's all I can say, because there's not an easy pathway to reduce this. It's putting all our hands on deck and trying to do the best we can, which we are. As a matter of fact, on Saturday we had a suicide awareness program in Essequibo. We had one on the East Coast, talking to people that they don't need to, take their lives when there is something happening. Try talk to a friend, call a neighbor, talk to somebody. Don't act in such a harsh manner that you take your life and then you leave your kids behind. And then, all of that, it creates more problem for your children, for your family, for society, and so on.
Mr. Ali, you were PS at Ministry of Education at one time. What programs did the Ministry of Education put in place? I know Minister Prasad is now initiating some programs, for Ms. Chandarpal just said. What did the Ministry of Education during your time or now putting in place in collaboration with the other ministries to work with our young people to hopefully bring this pandemic, if you want to call it a pandemic, to an end?
The pandemic of underachievement. I'm trying to get
suicide. Pandemic of suicide.
Oh. Well, the suicide issue is dealt with mainly through the Ministry of Health. There's a hotline that I know of when I was Permanent Secretary of Health for cases for people who are experiencing any difficulty to contact the ministry's hotline. Plus, there were other interventions made by the ministry to have seminars and all kind of interventions to see whether they can assist people who may be suicidal and who need help. So yes, that's being done. But as you're talking about education, suicide is more a mental health issue, and not so much one whether the mainstream education really has responsibility for. But having said all of that, I agree that the suicide rate in Guyana is high, and something must have to be done to bring it to them. And there are a lot of explanations, some of which are mental health, some are sociological, because there are a lot of sociological explanation for suicide as well. And if you study, read up Durkheim's theory of suicide, you would find that suicide may not necessarily be a mental health issue. It can also be a society issue or sociological issue.
Yeah. Mr. Ali, I know we're out of time. I know you have a good explanation there. I know we're out of time. I know Guyana's suicide is more localized, so Guyana is kind of exclusive. But Ms. Chandarpal and Mr. Ali too, before we close, in Indian community, we had or we know about these jihadi boys, our foreparents who came from India on the same ship, they became brothers and so on. In the Indian community that I grew up in, I knew that there were elders you could have gone to. And and they will listen to you and try to work with you. And I'm sure in the African communities, they also have that same kind of arrangement. Why don't we work with the villages? And I'm sure there are still good people in the village who can work with their parents, with our young people to ensure that, the problems within the village can be solved by people within the village. Is that something that you think the government should be looking at?
Actually, the community advocate program envisages such interaction with people, village elders, like the pandits, the priests, the mulvis, retired public servants. The community advocates envisage all those people because it was recognized that is the way to go. So it is an initiative that is now starting, and I am hopeful that it will catch on, and it is the way to go. So all of us need to work with the ministry to help in this regard, to make our services available so that people can get the kind of help. Sometimes in life, people need somebody to talk to. Sometimes they don't need anything from you. all they need is a listening, an ear, somebody to listen to them. But we live in this world that is so busy that we don't have time to listen to anybody. We're busy focusing on a computer or a cell phone or something like that, and we give people a little bit of our time, whereas people need much more of our time. So this is a problem that we're all faced with. They go to a funeral, they're not listening to what's being said. They go to a wedding, whether it's not taking out photographs of themselves, they're not listening. This technology is really messing us up. It's positive, but
well, it's also cultural, Miss Chandarpal. It's cultural. You go to a funeral here in New York, and the guys outside at the parlor, they're chatting like crazy, and the members inside are having grief. But it doesn't really matter. You just go and show your support because the people in your village and so on. So that's a kind of cultural thing we have to work on. But I recommend to the government, I'm sure Minister Prasad is looking at also, as you rightly said, to work with people within the communities who can work with all who are trusted and that hopefully work with our young people and our parents. Ms. Chandarpal, Mr. Ali, time has run out on us. Anything in closing?
Well,
all right,
Mr. Chandarpal, go.
It's okay. I just want to say it was a pleasure being on Globespan talking to you. There's so much things we can talk about. There's so much questions and so much different answers. I want to congratulate you all for the work you're doing to bring to the people, whether in America or wherever, the countries they're listening to hear the views of those of us from Guyana. I mean, it may not be the views that you want to hear, may not like what we say, but at least we have the right to be heard and also to make our views heard out there. And I just want to say that we are thankful to all of you who live in the diaspora for your continuous contribution to Guyana. Same way we are happy here and we do the best we can. I know you all over there, your heart is with Guyana and you would like to see the best of our country, because you will always be a Guyanese no matter which part of the world you go. And I know you all want the best for Guyana. So thank you all once again.
Thank you, Ms. Chandarpal. Thank you, Mr. Ali.
Well, I would also like to thank you for the work you're doing. I think this conversation is necessary and we have to have more of it. But I also would want to say that we are, as I said in my earlier remarks, we are living in exciting times. And, it's sad that the political opposition, and I don't want to come across political in the sense, but Guyana, my humble view, cannot move forward unless we embrace some important values, one of which must be acceptance of the democratic will of the Guyanese people. And this narrative that the opposition is peddling still about PPP being an implanted government, that they were cheated out of the 2020 general and regional elections, it's not helping the cause that the president is attempting, which is to build a government, national unity, the one Guyana concept that he's embracing. And I would want to take this opportunity to urge the opposition that they have to, in the interest of the Guyanese people, to change that narrative and begin to start a process of dealing with the realities. That reality, as you know, is that they have lost the elections through free, fair, and verifiable means. And until and unless they accept that they have lost the election, I believe that the basis for moving this country forward is going to be, not fully met. So I just thought I should conclude on that note, because as I said, if you look at all the macro indicators of development, the economy is doing very well, is fantastic. We are projecting a 50% growth of the total economy, and that is, as you controlled by oil. But in non-oil economy too, the agriculture sector and other sectors are showing impressive growth rates. And I think that speaks well of our future. And I want to take this, use this program to encourage all Guyanese that they should respond to the One Guyana initiative of the president because this is the way to go. I thank you once again for inviting me and for sharing in this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ali. Dr. Rose, anything in closing?
Yes, I support the One Guyana initiative being promoted by Dr. Orphan Ali, our president. I also would like to say that we should increase the retirement age from 55 to 62 at least. We should at least give public servants, police officers, teachers, nurses, a starting salary of $150,000 a month, and this will let them ease the cost of living expenses they have to face. Calling on the government to pressure those companies that provide internet services. You cannot talk to someone on WhatsApp without being interrupted. But the people are losing the internet service for days in Guyana, but they still have to pay the full fee at the end of the month. They have no recourse. And the last thing, I'm asking all government employees to answer their landline phones in office. Please.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rose. Thank you, Ms. Chandarpal. Thank you, Mr. Ali. And also we want to remember our president is here in New York for the UN General Assembly. We want to wish him and his entourage a very successful trip here in New York. I know he's very busy. He met Guyanese here yesterday at the Jamaica Center. He was in Florida to meet with people in Orlando. He was in Washington. He met with the vice president and so on. So the president is very busy working for a beautiful country of Guyana. So we want to wish the president all the best. And to all our people out there, thank you so much for watching. And until the next time, God bless our great country of Guyana. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.